Has real estate gone crazy, or is it just a bubble? On this episode, we get to the bottom of it with special guest Joanne Goneau. Welcome to Think Heart. Welcome to Think Heart. I'm Scott Goodfellow. This is Ben Hart, Hart Investment Group.
Hello.
Well, Ben, as you know, the real estate market's gone crazy.
Yep.
You know, we get questions every day whether or not people should continue to invest in real estate, with the prices being what they are. So we went out and found the best expert that we could, Joanne Goneau from the Goneau Team, also a broker of record of real estate or Remax Absolute Realty. Welcome, Joanne. Thanks for joining us.
It's good. We're excited to hear what you have to say tonight. Anything else, Scott, you want to add before we jump into it here?
Well, why don't we just start off with, I don't know, where were you going with that, Ben?
And are we ready to go? We're ready to jump right into it?
We're ready to jump into it.
Okay.
So, yeah, go ahead, Ben.
All right. Well, I've known Joanne, I think 9 or 10 years now, and certainly excited to have you on. We've worked with a number of real estate agents and brokers over our life, my wife and I. Obviously, we bought and sold 5 or 6 houses now, and worked with Joanne a couple of times. And one thing I'll say about Joanne is you were always, no matter what time we called, what time of day it was, you picked up that phone and answered it. No matter how many hundreds of questions that my wife had, or I had, mostly weren't mine. You always answered them and took the time and were patient. So listen, I'm excited to have a chat with you tonight. And maybe you can tell me a little bit about your history, your career. I know you've been in real estate for a long time, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing. So maybe tell me a little bit about how you got into real estate and where it started.
Okay, well, thanks, Ben, very much for having me. And it was always a pleasure working with both you and your wife, Angie. So I've been selling real estate since I was 18 years old. So there I'm giving you my age all right away. 1986, I joined real estate. I first joined with Campanelli Real Estate for 2 years. And at the age of 20, I decided to get my broker's license and join the local Remax office in Ottawa in Bell's Corners. So I've been working out of Bell's Corners since I was 20. And so it's been quite an experience of seeing all the different markets over the years. In 2001, 2011, I decided to go out and branch out and purchase a Remax franchise and became a broker owner 10 years ago. So I've now been running my own brokerage as well as my own team, Joanne Goneau Team, with a group of 6 people, and including my daughter. And so it's been pretty exciting, but that's where it all started, and as it continues.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good for you. That's early to start your career. You must have really been hustling and making it work. Maybe tell me a little bit about the market at that time, because that would have been an interesting time. Rates were a heck of a lot different. Prices were a lot different. Maybe tell me a little bit about what the market was like.
So, well, my first sale was for $69,900 on Hetherington Court in the center of the city. Interest rates were 13 3/4, almost, but they just come down from being almost 17% the year prior. So it was a tough market. I worked for a very strong cold calling company that, we were one of the biggest listers in the city at the time, because we were all on the phones, calling, hustling, looking for listings. And back then it was very different, because they always had the saying, you would list to last, and it was all about getting the listings, and it didn't matter at what price, because we were taught how to reduce the prices if it hadn't sold after 5 or 6 months, because some of them took 5 and 6 months to get sold. So it was a very different market.
Yeah.
Taught you a lot of skills on how to deal with people.
Sure.
And we had a lot of times where we were visiting people and saying, well, the market is just, your market has gone down, or it hasn't gone to the price they wanted. And there was a lot of distress sales, I think, back then.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. That is certainly a different time. You probably learned a lot. I mean, that cold calling isn't done the same way like it would have been back then. You probably learned a lot about sales at that time.
I certainly did. You learned how to door knock. You learned how to, pick up the phone and ask for the business. And we marketed by walking in the neighborhoods, knocking on doors, introducing ourselves. So it was actually a very nice time in the business, I found, because the technology wasn't there, but what was really nice was the face-to-face relationship building with your clients and with your colleagues in real estate as well, because we would know all of the agents. We could put a name to a face,
right?
Which often you can't do, and it made it. It was a bit more cutthroat, I would say, but it was also much more enjoyable because we certainly worked closely with our colleagues and our peers.
Sure. Would you remember?
So how do you find that different how would you find that different from now? Like, you find it's more disconnected now than it was? Like you mentioned that you were able to
I know all
connect
the
with your
oldies,
colleagues.
Scott, if you could say that. When I see someone who's been in the business for 25 years, we know each other. We probably know each other's kids and families. Even if we weren't with the same company, I would knock on their door on 10 o'clock at night and hand them an offer, because we only had fax machines or your car to drive down the highway to get paperwork signed at midnight before the irrevocable was up. And so you got to know people. You got to work very diligently with the other agent, because I was a young single mother at the time when I started. At 21, I had my first child, and then I was single from 1994 right up till 2000. And so for 9 years, I worked with 2 young children at home and a fax machine and a lot of friends babysitting my children while I went out in the middle of the night to sign an offer, which it sounds weird, but that's what we did back then. And we sat by the fax machines, and if we couldn't get the fax working, or if you didn't have one at home, you'd get in the car and you'd drive at 11 o'clock at night to the other end of the city to sign an initial. So now today's technology is amazing. I'm going to say that this is the best technology, that we can sit at home, especially in COVID. We can sit here and I can sell a house a day if I wanted to, and I would never have seen you because we're just doing it all electronically. But unfortunately, you have to gain the trust of the consumer, and you have to learn who they are. And it's very difficult if you only have a 15-minute showing at a house the first time you meet someone, because they don't know who you are, and they're doing a lot of Googling and a lot of referrals, I guess.
Yeah, that's a much different market. I'm sure it changes the process. I'm sure it changes how you negotiate, because I know if you're negotiating on behalf of somebody, if you don't know who's on the other side of the deal, you're kind of negotiating with one arm tied behind your back a little bit.
We really never negotiate anymore. In the last year and a half to 2 years, in all these bidding wars, we really don't get to negotiate with the other party or their realtor. We just drop the offers off, and they decide which one's the best price. Whereas back in the day, I would send back an offer of $200,000. You'd send it back at $240,000. You'd go back and forth almost all night until you came down to the middle at the end of the day. But now that doesn't happen. So the fun of that negotiation part, I would consider myself a very strong negotiator, but
for sure,
now it's a little bit more of strategies rather than negotiations. Like, how am I going to win the offer? What kind of a deposit should I put, or should I put up a clause saying that we are accepting it as is, or certain strategies that you can learn in your skills and over the years that might make a buyer or a seller, and their agent like your offer better than somebody else's.
Right. Yeah, that's a big change, a big adjustment. I mean, I know when we worked together, there was certainly a lot of negotiation that happened, and that makes a big difference on getting a deal done. And now you have to change course a little bit. So maybe tell me a little bit about, obviously, you're in the late 80s, we get in the 90s, the economy starts to continue to do pretty well. Interest rates are falling, so it's probably market's doing pretty well. But then, as we get into 2000, you probably get a pretty frothy real estate market in Ottawa. Do you remember what that market was like and how it felt? Is any similarities there or not at all?
Well, in 2000, well, I guess in Ottawa market, we're pretty stable. So 4 to
Yeah,
6% per year,
yeah,
standard increases.
yeah,
We do see double digits probably every 16 years in Ottawa.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there were double digits in the 80s. There were
yeah,
double digits in the 90s we went down for 4 years in a row, but not very much. And then
yeah,
when we started to climb again, by the time we got to 2000, the double digits were back about 14 and maybe 12% for 2 years. And
yeah,
then we consistently went up between 4 and 7. So this is different what we're seeing
yeah,
right now because
yeah,
many people haven't been in the business long enough to have seen double digits
yeah,
or low interest rates or this kind of a market. So a
yeah,
lot of new to the industry people are like, wow, this has never been seen and this
yeah,
is crazy. But
yeah.
what we have right now is supply and demand issues. That's
Sure,
really
sure.
what we have, which then will breed that double interest rates or double increases and a bit more of a frenzy, I guess.
Yeah,
You know, so I'd say it's a lot. Even when HST came back years ago, we had
yeah,
where HST was coming in. Everybody had to buy by June, and
yeah,
back then, I mean, that was an insane year. Everybody
yeah.
was trying to get in before they had to pay HST on things, and
Sure,
so
sure.
our market in Ottawa seems to go with the news, and so
Yeah,
whatever the news dictates, a lot of the consumers they listen and watch and think everything is what the news says,
yeah,
and so it's quite funny how it kind of we're a very government city, and I think we have stability. This now is being fired by, now the media has gotten on to say it's a hot market, it's a hot market, it's a hot
yeah,
market.
yeah,
Everybody's paying 100,000 more. Well,
yeah,
so now everybody, if you put your house at a normal price now, well, guess
yeah.
what? They don't want to buy it because they think they're going to have to pay 100,000 more than that. So,
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it's not a fun market, I'll tell you.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you ask most of the top agents and the most of
yeah,
the people who are in the thick of this,
yeah,
they don't like it because I'm going to tell you, never in my career have I felt so vulnerable to not being able to go into someone's house.
yeah,
Of course, I can go in with comparables and I can go
Sure,
in with all the sales.
yeah,
But I'll tell you that the stress of not being able to give you an answer of how much your house is worth
yeah,
is probably a big thing for somebody who's been in the business for 36 years and take pride on being able to provide valuable information to the consumer.
yeah,
But we don't know right now. What we know is that the buyer will determine what your house is worth, which has always been that way. But
Right,
now there's multiple buyers, and there's some that will put all their money in one bag, and then you're out of the water.
yeah. Yeah, it's shooting in the dark for sure. So I guess what obviously interest rates play a big part in that, and prices driving up. Of course, inventory would be another one. So how tight is the inventory, and do you think some of that inventory constraint is related to buildings slowing down because of COVID, or do you think it's something else?
So before COVID, if we could say rewind to January of 2020,
Yep.
which I think maybe December we were hearing of COVID in Europe and
Yep.
so on, but we weren't really hearing much. I went to Vegas in February, and I remember getting on the plane, and I was going to Las Vegas to a Remax convention, and we were kind of laughing. We were kind of like, oh, look at that person, they've got a mask on, and we weren't really taking it serious because it really hadn't hit.
Sure.
But prior to that time.
Yeah.
Our normal traditional January, February, March is the best time of year for a seller to sell because inventory is low. There's not a lot of listings. People usually wait till after the March break. And the market was quite good. And we were already seeing lack of listings with our normal spring, January, February, March market. And spring in Ottawa is really January 15th, in my opinion. For my whole career, it starts January 15th. And you sell for April or May move-in dates, but it starts after the 15th of January. So we already had that lack of listing, and we already had builders at the time that could not supply because 3 years prior to that, we had a negative in most of our markets in the rural areas and in the suburbs, where we only went up maybe 1.2%, 1%. So over a 5-year term prior to 2020, we really hadn't, had huge increases. In 2019, we went up 8%, and all of a sudden went, oh my God, everybody said the market's coming back. But really what it was doing was catching up from the 5 years that we hadn't had any increase. And then in 2020, we went up like 3.9. And then or maybe I'm up by one. So 18, 19, and then 2020, we then went up, 20%. And so I feel that this is a little bit of catch up. And then with the COVID issue coming in and the builders not being able to supply, everybody turned to resale. And we also had a lack of rental. And, so all of a sudden we've got a master storm of COVID. People can't move. People can't find a house to live. Interest rates were low. So all the buyers want to get in the market at the best time to get in, but there wasn't any supply. And so it's kind of a perfect storm, but it's escalated with COVID more and more. And with every lockdown, it gets higher and higher because if now the kids are at home with school, you can't show your house when your kids are online. So you can't put your house for sale. So now the people who are on the market are going to benefit from a tighter market in the next 2-3 weeks.
Sure.
And then as soon as it opens up again, we're going to see more people coming in. So it's been a funny, kind of been a teeter-totter.
Yeah, for sure. So where do you think the prices are at now? Like, do you think it's overinflated, or do you think is it
just pausing
I mean, Ottawa market doesn't tend to really come back down much, right? Like, it's pretty flat once there's not those big dips, right? So what's going to happen? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you what's going to happen. And that's the worst part about this is that we don't know. But at the same time, right now, active listings in the current market, there's 2,021 active listings on the Ottawa real estate market. That's from Cornwall to Petawawa. That's a very wide, that's not a lot of listings. And there has been 6,135 residential sales, and there's been 1,659 condo sales from 1st of January till today's date. So that means there's been 7,794 sales so far this year. Every year we see 18,000 sales. That's about average. 1 year it's 17.5, next year it's 18, then next year's 8. So we go up about 500 sales more per year. So I think we're on scale for, we're definitely on, we have more sales. There's been more sales this year than last year. But at the same time, we're still not getting that influx of inventory. So what I should say is almost everything is selling. Like used to be 30,000 listings would go on and 50% of them would sell and 50% wouldn't. But now we're seeing that most listings, if you're priced okay, they may not sell in a bidding war, but if you wait 1 week or 2 weeks, they will sell. So do I see that prices are crazy? Well, prices are not what we're used to. And, a lot of people are saying they're selling for $100,000 more. So I'm going to say to you, there are some neighborhoods that there has not been enough sales for us to have very good comparables.
So when I go to a bungalow, let's say in Beaverbrook, and all these people are senior citizens, and for the last or they're not all senior citizens. I'm sorry, I'm making a generalization, but many people have been there for 20 and 30 years because it's a beautiful neighborhood. Okay. So they're not moving anytime soon. And now somebody needs to go and move, and you only have one comparable or two sales, but they're not quite the same houses. Then when I have to go price that house, I don't know what to price it at. So I price it at the last comparable that sold. But if that last comparable was last year and we added 20%, which is what we should do, and then I market it to the people at 20% higher, and then they ask their realtor, can you show me, Joanne, what the last sales went for? And it's $150,000 less. They're going to look at me and say, well, I'm not going to pay that much. So then what we do is we put them on at what the last sale is, and then people make their own judgment of what they feel it's worth. And, what's really strange right now in this market is the consumers, when they put their house in the market, and they are putting them on lower because a lot of agents are recommending it, a lot of them they don't sign on the dotted line if they don't get their price. And that's something we've not seen before. So that's the newest and the hardest thing, I think. It's the speculation that's going on right now in the market.
I mean, it definitely continues to be there. I know that, obviously we have lots of conversations with people, and, I think about it from obviously we think about it a little bit differently from the perspective. I think about interest rates as being a big driver of the price differential, right? We came into 2020 at the 5-year at 290, and that kind of dropped a full percentage point over 12 months, over 6 months anyways. And so you had a huge influx in price, and people oftentimes don't think about that, right? Mortgage payment X at 2.9 gives you a $600,000 house. At 1.9, it gives you a $750,000 house for the same payment. So obviously the people are not, thinking about it from that perspective. What's the payment I can handle? It's been probably a very unique year for you. It sounds like,
to say the least. And just learning, I think the big thing is that you have to be in this industry. You always had to be ahead of the game, and always be willing to change at a drop of a hat into something or a new process. And that's been the most difficult this year for a lot of realtors, and including myself, because 1 week it's one way, and we used to do 7 days financing, and then you'd have people could do their financing and do their building inspection, and they could take their time for 7 days and feel maybe stressed, but not as stressed as, okay, now I have to buy a house for $700,000. I have 15 minutes or a half an hour to see it, and I'm not going to see it again until after I've bought it cash with no conditions. Well, I'm sorry, that is very difficult. So,
that's tough,
as a team, what we've done is we've decided that value add for our sellers, but also value add for the consumers that are buying our listings. We've done our own building inspections with engineers, and we're providing them to people. And then people can make an educated decision, but we then get all cash offers with people that are confident that they're buying something that doesn't have, tons of problems with it, And I think that's the biggest challenge with a lot of consumers as well as agents, because they don't know how to service their buyers and make them confident.
Well, that's smart.
It must be difficult to work with buyers right now. Is it difficult to work with buyers right now to find them something?
Yeah. And I think the realtors in the city of Ottawa, if I can say and speak for them, because I own a brokerage and I see a lot of my very good agents that are extremely busy, but now they're like triple overload. And even the banks are on triple overload, because what happens is, Scott, if you were buying a house with me, we might be offering on 20 houses before you win. And I'm actually not showing you 7 houses at a time. I'm showing you 1 house at a time. And then you have to wait 7 days before you can bid on it. And then while you're out getting groceries, you might get a call that says, oh, we've decided to take a preempted offer. And now you have 15 minutes. And so does your realtor have 15 minutes to get a hold of you and tell you, oh my God, Scott, the house you want to buy in 3 days, well, you have to buy it now. And, there's 7 offers. And so I think the realtors in this city, I'm not going to compare you, but we were deemed essential because a lot of people have to buy a house because they'd sold a home and they didn't have a house to move to. And so we've gone out of our way to try and assist people, but it is extremely hard. And the buyers get frustrated. The buyers are I wouldn't want to be a buyer in this business right now. I mean, I moved on March the 25th last year. The day that they stayed, the pandemic was happening. Okay, state of emergency. And I'm going to tell you, that stress of the bank not being able to close on time and closing 2 houses the same day, I lived it. And it's not easy. So, I would say if you're a buyer, well, you need to have a thick set of skin to go out in this market today.
What do you think the best strategy is, though, if you're a buyer? Like, if I'm the buyer and you're working with me and I say, you know what, I want this house, Joanne, get me this house. You know what I can go up to. I need this house.
So the strategies that I would tell you, Scott, first you get pre-qualified. And first you deal with a mortgage broker, not necessarily the banks, because the banks today have more policies than the brokers have. And that's not a dig against the banks, but unfortunately, the banks will tell you as a buyer, Scott, bring me the offer, and then we'll do our credit check, and then I'll see if you can afford the house that you just paid for cash. And so you need to be on a good term with a broker that could be available to be on speed dial if we need to talk to her on a fast minute. Okay, can I buy this? Can I go $50,000 more? But you also have to have an agent that knows how to price a house and how to predict what is going to happen. So if I see a listing, I would do my research. I would do a price index research. I'd find out what they've been going up in that neighborhood, what the last model sold for. I could then do the calculations of what it should be worth. But then I also can look at the neighborhood and maybe not comparables that are direct, but perhaps a listing that might have sold in the neighborhood that somebody who doesn't have knowledge, or an agent that may not have knowledge, might tell their buyer that you could go this high because this is another 4-bedroom that sold. And if they didn't know the market well, they may bid that high, but then make a mistake. So you need an agent that knows the communities and knows the difference between Katimavik on these streets and Katimavik on these streets. Ones are custom and some are cookie cutter models by normal builders, or Stittsville, Granite Ridge, that's custom versus, Mattamy in this part of Stittsville. And I think that's what I would tell you as advice, is to make sure you have a realtor that is up to speed, understands the process, knows the ins and outs of today's market, not 2 years ago. So I think it's important to ask them, how many houses do you sell and how many houses have you sold since COVID? Because there's 3,900 agents in the city of Ottawa. And there's a lot of amazing agents, but there's a lot of agents that aren't doing this full time. So you'd really want to make sure you've got, an agent that knows their stuff.
So have you seen deals like for deals firm up and then because somebody paid too much, they'll come back to you? Are those happening? Or like you'd be, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's happening. So what's happening mostly is that we have to investigate who the buyer is, Ben. When we're a seller and you've got 7 offers on the table, it's really not about getting excited about the one that's $200,000 and then there's all these others at 100,000 over asking. You have to say, well, who's this person who's putting $200,000 more? And do they own a property in the city? Have they sold their house? Are they coming from outside of the country? Are they coming from a different community? And I think if you then investigate them, Google them, find out that, they probably have the down payment. So if it doesn't appraise, then they will be able to still afford it and it will close. But now what we're doing, Ben, is we're asking for bigger deposits.
Got it.
So years ago, we would take $5,000, $3,000, and it was fine. And we always used to look at Toronto, and we'd always say, wow, I mean, these guys are getting 1% of the purchase price as a deposit. Why is that? And Ottawa, government town, would say, oh, no, I can't give you more than $3,000, And so I don't believe that many realtors in the city of Ottawa knew that a deposit, even though it's not the owners or even though it's not the real estate agents, the deposit, it makes a huge difference because it's security for the homeowner to know that somebody might not walk away. And I will say in my career of 36 years that I've never had a deal not close. And that's a huge thing. But I've also in my career never seen people not drop deposits off, people not, only in the last 2 years. And as an owner of a company, I do hear it. And we now have to, we don't mark it sold until the person drops a deposit off. And even though it's a binding contract, the moment that they signed it without a deposit, and if also the owner doesn't suffer a loss, and the next day sells it for the same price, then he has no lawsuit or recourse over that buyer who just walked away.
Got it.
And so the money does sit in my trust account, which many consumers think it automatically comes to them. Like if you're a seller and they think, oh, the buyer walks away, I get to keep that $20,000. That's what agents don't know. They don't have that conversation. It's not their money. It's not their money till somebody signs a mutual release or until the judge awards it to you because you've suffered a loss. So
got it.
Yes, if a foreign buyer, if it's more expensive, and let's say in 6 months you bought a house today for 200, and next 6 months from now, you don't like it, or 2 months from now you're going to close, and there's a whole lot better properties to invest in. Because you think you bought for too much, or you paid a minimum. Say you might not get on that plane from Asia. With a $3,000 ticket. If you only have a $3,000 deposit, you'd say, oh, well, I'm just going to walk away from my deposit.
Forget it.
But people aren't usually walking away from $20,000.
Sure.
They won't get it unless, if that seller does, if Scott never wanted to sign the mutual release as a seller and you were the buyer, that money will stay in my trust account for 2 years. If nobody goes to court after 2 years, then it goes to the registrar and they wait for 3 more years. And if still no lawsuits are taken, then it goes to the government.
Okay. Interesting.
And nobody knew that because this has never happened in our business. So that's new. It's not new. It's just a new concept that we now have to understand and explain that the reason why we need. So if you want to win, Scott, on that listing, and then we're putting a bid on Ben's house and there's 19 offers, and you're not walking away, and you're putting down 20%, which is probably over $100,000, no matter what, then you would maybe put a deposit of $70,000. And when your offer goes in against 9 other people, and you have a $70,000 bank draft deposit, I'm going to look at you really serious, Scott, because I'm going to know that, wow, my house is going to close in 2 months. And even if you paid too much, in my opinion, because I've never seen prices like this, you're better than gold because your 100,000 is in that real estate office's office until you either close or until I say you're going to have your money back, which I'm never going to, right? Until the judge awards it.
Exactly.
So that's some of the strategies. And I believe, like So I've never left money on the table as a seller, but I've seen sellers have 19 offers. One's at 120, let's say, and one's at 140, and they take the 120 because we've investigated who the buyer is. We found out that the 140 guy never even saw the house.
Right. Yeah.
And so
for
there's
sure.
a big risk. They've never seen it. They can change their mind pretty quick.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say where the buyers are coming from? Is it mostly people in the city, or is there a lot of external buyers? What are you seeing from a trend?
Well, we're seeing a lot of people from Toronto, Vancouver.
Okay.
We're seeing
Yeah.
people coming from other cities because we have the normal military influx as well. But lots of people have come from Toronto last year. A lot
Okay.
of people who sold in Toronto did very well. They could last year they could have bought and not get a mortgage. Maybe not so much this year because we're catching up. But we also are seeing a lot of foreign buyers. We have amazing schools in this city. So a lot of people from other countries come to Canada for our education. And we have great universities, we have great high schools, we have great lifestyles. So Canada was voted just recently #1 place to live. And so they are investing in our country. And I think they're investing in Ottawa because we've always been a very affordable place and we've never really caught up to all those big cities. So we are catching up. And I think we're getting to that point where we're considered a great place to live. And, we are more a great place to, invest in. So we're seeing a lot of people coming from foreign countries to do that. Now, they are going to put restrictions on them, too, in the budget yesterday. They said if you're not a resident, they will be putting on some more restrictions. So that would stop people. But I don't think it's stopping them because they're still coming in and buying in the zones where there's really amazing schools.
Yeah, and it's not that punitive, I don't think, not enough to really stop them. If you tend to become from another country, you tend to have some money and some capital to put up. So that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I know we talked early on as well about OFSI starting to change the rules around lending. Do you think that's going to have a material change? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what those rules are, the stress tests.
So as of as of June 1st. So first of all, if you're a buyer and you bought a house today and it doesn't close until August, you're safe, you're grandfathered. So the buyers who already have under contract closing after June 1st, there is absolutely no issues. You don't have to do that stress test. But if your contract is signed after June 1st of this year, and you are a person who's not going through an insured mortgage. So insured mortgage would mean CMHC, Genworth. If it's not, so if you're 5, 10, 15%, you're not having to worry about this. But if you wanted to, so if you're an investor and you have to put 20% down, then unfortunately you are not going through these insured mortgages. You could if you wanted to, but most people want to avoid those costs, those insured costs. So now you'll have to qualify. Right now, the stress test is 4.23% is the stress test right now. And so, basically, it's going to go up to 5.25%. So if you're putting the 20% down, you'll have to qualify at a 5.2% interest rate. So that's big. That's a whole percentage difference than what the stress test is now. So what they're recommending, even if you're a homeowner that wants to maybe consolidate some debt and you want to take some equity out of your current house, or if you want to take some equity out of your house to buy an investment, you're still going to have to qualify now to do that at 5.25% after June 1st.
Okay.
So now is the time to refinance.
Yeah.
Now is the time to pull out some equity to buy an investment and maybe just, have it there, or maybe consolidate those high debt credit cards and all that stuff. And, or if you have a mortgage coming due in a few months, you might want to do that now and renew it early. It might be worth it. But for the buyers, it's only going to be the ones that have the 20% down. And there is a lot of those people that have 20% down, because there's a lot of people who are second-time buyers and selling their smaller house to buy big, or even downsizers. Retired people who put all their money in, and maybe they're going to get a $100,000 mortgage, to top it up.
Sure.
Well, they'll have to qualify at 5.5% interest.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting, and certainly that would have, kind of to your point, maybe a bigger impact on some of the rental units. So maybe you can tell me a little bit. I know you're familiar with rental income and rental properties. Maybe tell me a little bit about what that market's been like. Maybe if you know what the cap rate's been like and stuff like that.
I don't know cap rates, because cap rates don't work in this market, unfortunately.
Okay,
So it's hard. I'm going to say to you that, if an investor wants a property, they're not necessarily looking at cap rates. They can't even look at potential, because the mortgage won't be qualified on potential rents. The mortgage will only be qualified on current rents. And so the rental market is hard. And but if an investor wants to buy a great duplex or triplex, I think they look at their own cap rate and they'll figure out their own strategies, because every investor will have a different way of them getting to their cap or figuring out. Otherwise, they'll just put more money down to make the numbers work. Most investors don't want to put the money down. That's the thing. They want to leave their cash to themselves. And the market today for renters is very difficult. And if you're a seller and you're trying to sell your investment who has a tenant in it, during the first part of COVID, we had what was no eviction notices. So we weren't allowed to give tenants notice for personal use. So you, as an investor, would sell your house that has a tenant in it. And if a buyer like Scott wanted to move into that property for himself, he could buy it. He would have to give notice to the tenant that he's moving in personally, 60 days. But you can't do that in COVID when there's a lockdown. So they took those, and then if you are Scott, and Scott, you're buying that house with less than 20% down because you want to live in it yourself. So you're going to go through CMHC or one of these insurers. They won't even close if that tenant doesn't leave. So if the tenant doesn't leave and you've bought it as personal use without 20% down, on the day of closing, guess what? They're not funding your mortgage. And now all of a sudden, we don't have a closing date. And so it's been a challenge, because many realtors have to decide or have to figure out, are you moving in, Scott, and are you moving in for sure? Because don't rely on your mortgage commitment, because if the tenant doesn't leave, even though you've given them notice, but now it's locked down and they don't have to leave and they don't have to pay rent. Now I wanted to move into that house, and you can't even evict them because you don't own it yet. And so then the landlord has to take them, or the owner has to take them to the landlord and tenant board. But those tribunals are so backlogged right now. Best of luck. So there's a lot of buying tenants out. There's a lot of people sign here, and you have to give them 2 months notice anyways, and some sort of incentive. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that are giving them bigger incentives because the tenants also know their rights. And so lockdown just went again last, I guess, what was it, March? What was it, 2 weeks ago? Or has it been 10 days already?
Something like that now.
So before that, the eviction notices were allowed. And so the day that they said we're back into lockdown, the eviction notices are now banned again. And so today, if I sell a house with a tenant in it, I can't give notice until till the ban is off, which will be May 20th. So the first day I could possibly give notice to a tenant would be June 1st. So the first day you could close, if you're moving in for yourself, Scott, is July. Now, if it happens to go to, let's say they extend it to June the 5th, then you can't give notice till July 1st, which then gets you out end of August. So right now, I'm going to tell you that we don't even want listings that have tenants in it,
Got it.
because they also can say, guess what? I don't feel well today and don't come in, which is a valid reason. But they also can say, I don't want anybody in my house because I don't want to get infected. And then they don't want pictures, and they don't want, unfortunately, dealing with tenants in today's market has been a bit of a nightmare. A lot of landlords are out rent. Like, I have 5 rentals, and one of my tenants has been paying me, but he's paying me sporadically.
Right.
And I feel for him because he lost his job, and I'm a good landlord. But there's a lot of landlords that need that income to pay their mortgage, and they have put 20% down, but they have maybe lost their job, and they're trying to cover their mortgages on their house, and now they have this investment property that they need that $2,000 a month to pay the rent and the taxes, and so it's not a pretty thing for some people who have invested without the security.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you finding, are people buying or interested in buying investment properties right now in this market, or no?
Absolutely.
Like, are you,
because the interest rates are so cheap.
Really?
Interest rates are cheap.
Yeah.
The thing is you have to find, there's some investors that will say it's too crazy for me, I'll just sit back. But there are some good opportunities out there. And so, like condos, for instance, some of these older condo buildings, that the numbers still work.
Okay.
$300,000 for a 2-bedroom condo in a 1979 build, where condo fees maybe include heat and hydro, but you could rent it for $2,100, and it will all cover with the interest rates being so cheap.
Yeah.
But it's few and far between, because that's at $300,000. As you get to $500,000 and $600,000 freehold townhouse, no longer does $2,100 cut it.
Right.
Right, for a rent.
Right.
So that's where we're seeing a lot of rentals. There's a lot more rents this year than there was last year. There was a lack of rents. Now, if you look in Canada, there's probably many people who bought new homes 2 years ago as an investment, and they're sitting on empty units that are not being rented.
Interesting.
Because the consumer would rather pay that money into mortgage when the mortgage rates are so cheap, right?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe some comments around the commercial properties as well. Do you also do commercial, or are you familiar with what's happening? Yeah, okay.
So I do commercial as well. I don't dabble in it a lot. There's a lot, but if you walk the city, so today I walk I do a circle with some friends for exercise and mental health, right? So I walked the city today in the downtown core, from Somerset behind the Parliament through the Byward Market, all the way up Bank and Elgin, and then back to Somerset. So I do a 15-kilometer run in a couple of hours. It's insane, the amount of properties for lease out there. It's very sad. It's sad for our city to see all the restaurants. And so commercial is finding it hard as far as lease commercial and business commercial and that. Now, when you get into commercial investments, there's a lot of funds, hedge funds. I guess that's your thing, that, they pool their money together and come in and buy a lot of the big buildings in our city. It's very difficult for an individual or a consumer to compete against these big companies that have the insights perhaps a little bit sooner than a normal real estate agent would. So, and then as an agent, when I have the opportunity to sell those properties, you'd like to keep them for yourself, but that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is put it to market, and then you see that money's coming from everywhere, and people are just wanting that building. Whether the cap rates work, whether the numbers work, the investment is in the land and the real estate, right? Location.
Yeah. So let's just say hypothetically, what if we start to see a slowdown? What do you think? How does that play out in your mind? What do you think happens to obviously they're trying to tighten up a little bit, putting a little bit of pressure on housing, not enough, I think, to break anything. But what happens if we start to slow down? What do you think happens?
So I don't think much is going to happen, to be honest with you, because I think there's so many stress tests and there's so many people. We're very fortunate in Ottawa that we have the government that has the jobs. Yeah, maybe we're not going back to the physical buildings, but there's a lot of people that still have their jobs. We have great hospitals that are keeping people busy. So I don't believe that the slowdown, I guess you're never going to lose money in real estate if you're not selling at the bad time. There's the answer. So real estate is a great investment over time.
Yeah.
So if you're a flipper and you decide you want to buy and flip, well, flip this house doesn't work very well in Ottawa. I'll tell you, maybe other realtors will tell you different, but in my career, you don't see it working. I can see what you paid. I can see what you've put in, and we can usually work the math. And most people are like, well, I'm going to buy it and do my own renos type of thing. Now, lumber prices are up. So, of course, a lot of people go to those done up houses rather than the ones that need the renos because they realize they can't get the supply. But if it starts to dip, I think as long as you're not selling, then you qualified for your mortgage when you qualified.
Yeah.
If your job isn't lost, then you hold tight, eat spaghetti for the next 10 years or 5 years or whatever. Don't sell your house and cut back. I'm old school, so I'm one of these people that you hold your real estate. I'm a real estate agent telling you to hold your real estate. Imagine, but buying and selling, the cost of selling and buying, it'll all even out in the end because you're going to upgrade, which is great. And if you get lots of money now to upgrade, and then you end up buying in a high market, well, it works out in the wash because you would have bought in a low market and sold in a low market. So I think that if it slows down and starts to go into the negative, which is very doubtful, the only concern I have is taxes. Some of these things that might start to creep up if they start reassessing the taxes, where people's property taxes are now based on the sales that have happened in the last few years rather than 2016 numbers.
Very interesting.
That's my fear, to be honest with you. I think that, lots of us we complain about our taxes being high already, but they are based on a mill rate of 2016 sale, right? All of a sudden we get reassessed for tax, and it's based on sales in 2021.
That's a big number.
That's
a big jump.
Yeah, some areas have gone up 40%. It just is this year we're seeing 40% increase over last year some places. So it's so that's my fear. I think that we've never dipped in 60-year trend of Ottawa. We've gone down 5 times. That's it. And negative 0.56, I think, is what the total of is over 5-year times dipping. So we might hover around nothing or maybe 2 or 3%, but probably what we see after double digits is next year maybe will be 6%, 7%, then we'll go down to 4%, then it might stabilize. And again, you might have paid in a high market. Back in the day, 1994, I bought my house in a recession year. So I remember the next year, 2000, 2 years later, I was like, what did I do? I bought this house and look, my neighbor just sold for so much less than what I paid. But I wasn't selling. So I left my house. I stayed in my house for 9 years and I made $200,000 of equity. So the thing is over time, it will rebound and recover and you won't lose money.
I think you can probably say the same thing about equities as well and stocks, but we can leave that for another conversation.
I don't think. I don't think we should leave it for another conversation.
No, I mean the thing that the thing that I've said to everybody that wants to debate this, if you give me $1 million equity portfolio and I only have to put down 50 grand, that's a good transaction for me. I buy $1 million house and I only have to put down 50 grand. You're not, a lot of people look at them as the same thing. Typically, investors start in the equity market at $0 and build up their portfolio over time. Where real estate, you get huge leverage. Like even if you're putting 20% down, you're getting 80% leverage on your investment. You can't do that in equities. You can't do that in the market unless you're trading futures or options or something like that. So they're not, a lot of these comparables that you see, they're not apples for apples comparisons.
Yeah, I mean, hey, my first real estate purchase, I was no money down. I back in the day, I bought a lot. And then I went in with my house plans and said, this is what my house will be worth at the end of the day. And I built a house in Dunrobin on a lot that I paid $45,000 with. But then I used the mortgage money, $170,000 at the end of the day. I built my house, paid off the lot, and I sat on a $170,000 mortgage, no money down, basically, because they funded the whole thing at 13.75% interest. I was 20 years old. That was like the hugest risk I ever took in my life. I thought, what am I doing? My mortgage payment was $1,756. And I thought to myself, like, am I crazy? But then 9 months later, I sold my house in Dunrobin for $250,000. And I made that much money with no money down in 6 months. It was like, so that you can still do, but it's very rare. And unless you're staying over time, unless you time the market, no different than stocks.
Sure.
There's a lot of people that say, I'm going to buy now and then I'm going to sell it in the high market. But it's a hard thing to time that market when it's all about what the buyer's willing to pay for your house, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, $1,775 a month right now. What does that get you? That gets you probably somewhere close to, that gives you a lot of money. I'm thinking maybe $500,000.
1,800 gets you $400,000. In today's market. Back then it was 170,000.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's it was huge back then. I was 20 years old, just fresh in the market. My first house, my dad built it for me.
Nice.
Then I bought a condo once with my line of credit, because that's what investors do. They take a line of credit on their home equity, and I put my down payment from my line of credit, and I paid interest only for like 8 years. And I paid my mortgage with my tenant's rate, and I calculated that $30 of interest only on the down payment. So again, no money down, and bought a condo for $179,000. It's weird that's the same amount of money, but it was on Baseline Road. And today that's worth $300,000.
Okay.
And I didn't put any money down. My mortgage has been paid by my tenant. And the condo fees and the taxes and the little bit of interest on that line of credit. Then when I sold my house, of course I had to pay the line of credit off. So that got paid off. And now I'm left with a small little mortgage that's still paid by the tenant. But that's how you build your equity in your investments, right? And when I turn 65, well, then hopefully all that rent money will be coming in and pay me an income.
Cash flow, income for sure.
But everybody has a different, every investor, and I'm sure that's the same in the stock market, every investor has a different plan on how they'd like to invest and what their strategies are for longevity and is for gain, right? And how much they want to gain and how fast they want to gain, and different on playing the stock, but how much risk you want to take, etc.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always said that you should have multiple sources, multiple places to have your assets, and multiple sources of income when you're thinking to retire in the future. So I think, the stock market is one part in one place. Real estate also plays a part in portfolios. So I think it's a matter of having multiple buckets that you can reach from as you plan your future, for sure.
And we used to do private money too. Like that's also a great thing, is lending out your money from your, into the mortgage money. But unfortunately, with interest rates the way they are, mortgage money is so cheap.
Yeah.
Now, but speaking to some mortgage brokers, they're seeing a lot of private lending happening right now because
Interesting.
there's a lot of restrictions and there's a lot more stress tests and all these things. So there are people who are willing to lend that private money for a year with somebody who might be in the restaurant business and maybe he has gone on CERB and now doesn't qualify, but he's still a good, they can still afford, but they can't qualify because of something that happened in their situation of their job,
Yeah.
So that's always a good thing.
How much would you say, like, if a 5-year bank fix is at 2%, what's the secondary?
They're doing it
market
about
like
they're doing it about 4%.
Okay.
4.5, 4%. People are paying it because, but then they're also doing a fee. Like, so I'll lend you this money for 1 year till you can get back into the market and qualify, because that's usually it's a year term. And they pay it out of your RSPs into the fund of your RSPs, but they give you a flat fee of $2,000, I'd say, for that. So that's, you make $2,000 and then you make the interest over the year term. And then the goal is that they then get refinanced and get back into the regular market with the banks. Sure. But there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought, but I think that because of the restrictions, the lenders are having difficulty. The lenders are going out there and people are not getting qualified. There's some really wealthy people out there that own businesses, business owners that have equity in their house. But the bank still won't give them the money.
Yeah.
And it's very strange, but maybe their business was suffering and they were an employee of their business. So they went on CERB and they didn't realize that by going on CERB, now the bank wants to see your paycheck for the last 6 months and you went on CERB for 2 of those 6 months. Yeah. Now you don't qualify for that mortgage. I had that happen to somebody. He bought a house not realizing. And then he was going to go on the mortgage with his son. And they said he wasn't able to go on when in fact he owned his $1 million house. And it wasn't about that. It was all about showing him his income.
The debt scores.
There's a lot of scary stuff happening in this industry that maybe a lot of people don't see because maybe they're only doing certain transactions. But I guess I've benefited by owning the company, and my team sells, a lot of real estate per year. And this is not a bragging thing, but because we're selling as much real estate as we are, we're involved with a lot of different aspects of it, and we see a lot of things. So that's it's been a big eye opener for sure.
So would you say it's a good career still for somebody to get into?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm going to say to you this. Real estate is what you make it. I think like anything. So there is no get rich scheme in real estate. I'm sorry. It's hard work, pounding the pavement, dealing with people, knowing how to assist people and serve people with dignity and respect, and also with integrity. So I think that if you're a person of your word and your integrity and you're not in there for the money, this can't be about, you can't get in this business to say, I'm in it to make the big paycheck. Because the perception out there is that we all make a whole lot of money. And I'm going to say to you that the ones that make a whole lot of money, they have a lot of them have no life. And it's especially in these times when it's that much harder. Now, it is a great career. I would never give it up. I feel that, but I've built a reputation, and I've built a following, I guess you could say, of people who know that when they call me, I answer the phone. I had one call me today. Oh, it's funny how you answer the phone all the time when I call. So, the good agents are the ones who keep in touch, and they're available even when there isn't a paycheck. Should I say that? So that down the road they need to know, you want some advice, they can call you. You you give them the advice, and it's not about when are you selling your house? When can I make another deal from you? So I think if you get in the business to have longevity and work it as a business, not as a transaction every day, when's my next transaction? Then, and you're willing to work hard, it's very rewarding. And it's very rewarding more in the fact, not about the money reward.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see people get their dream home and to help people succeed. And so for me, that's what's inspired me right from the get-go. And I've enjoyed it. Now, some days I come home and say, oh my God, I can't deal with this anymore. But I think that's in everybody's job, right?
Of course. Of course.
So if when people come to see me, they often come to join and they say, oh, I want to be just like you, Joanne, and I'd like to join real estate. I'm going to join your company. And there's a lot of people in my company that were my ex-clients or high school friends that work for my company now. And they've realized, even my own brother got into the business, and they realize after they come and work, they go, wow, this isn't as easy as you make it look. So I think that's the biggest thing is the perception of the public is that we all drive fancy cars and we don't really work. And we just send you a document, you sign it with the electronic signature, and away we go. But there's a lot more behind scenes and fires to put out and emotions to deal with and psychiatrists and all that kind of stuff. So it's a great career, but you got to work.
Yeah. I think you're right. That can definitely be said about a lot of things. So of the 3,900 agents, like how many of the agents would be full time, like do this for a career? Is it most of them now? Because I know that there was a time there where there was a lot of part time people.
I think there's a lot of people who do it part time, not in the say of that they have another job, but perhaps they have a spouse that's at home that has a job that is supporting them, and they can just sell real estate on the side. So if they sell 6 houses, so out of the real estate market, there was 18,000 sales last year, and there were 3,900 agents, and that means the average agent sells 5.6 houses.
Got it.
And that's his true figure. Yeah. So when a great agent is selling 25 to 35 houses, that's a great career. That's busy. And then there's phenomenal agents that are selling 100 and 100 and some. And so, but most of those people are teams as well. I mean, there's a few agents that, go nuts and they want to do it all on their own. And I was one of those. I was a number one agent in the city back in the day and sold all of it myself. And that's a hard task, but there are lots of people that's what they desire to do. So as far as part-time that have another job, there definitely are people that have another job and do this, but you can figure those people out as well pretty quick because they won't be available Monday to Friday when you call them and they answer, or they're at Canadian Tire working the shelves or something. So I don't believe there's a lot, but there's a lot of, I'd say, more retiree people that kind of do it on the side.
Sure.
There's a lot that go away. But after they do their business and they leave it to their team. So they're never really, so there's a lot of great agents that work very, very hard and then they take a month off because they need a month off because they've worked very, very hard. But then they don't take a month off and don't work. They take a month off and let others on their team look after their business, and it still flows very well. So part-timers, I don't think you can do it and make money. And because you have to pay fees and you have to pay dues to the company. So they figure it out pretty quick that unless you have somebody supporting you, you really can't do this job part-time and do well.
Yeah, for sure.
Now in Toronto, there's 14,000 real estate agents.
Wow.
And there's probably over half never have sold a house.
Wow.
And in our board, I'd say there's probably at least 500 or 600 that have never sold a house.
Okay.
Out of that 3,900. You can hold a real estate license and you could be on a team, but not be selling a house, right?
Got it. Yeah.
You could be a licensed assistant.
Okay. Got it. Interesting.
So,
Well, that I don't know, Scott. I mean, I think that's been a very good, wide-ranging conversation. I don't know if you had any more questions
Amazing.
that you wanted to throw at Joanne.
I don't think so. You covered a lot of information. Anything else that you think that us or anybody needs to know about the market right now, or anything on your mind?
I think try not to listen to the news, I would think. I think the news scares people, and the news also heightens the excitement a lot, which, I mean, as a realtor, I could say that's great, but they went on the news and they were interviewing agents saying everything is selling in a bidding war and everything is selling over $100,000 more than asking. And then all of a sudden, we're trying to get back to a norm, perhaps. I think a lot of agents would like this market to be more of a level playing field, perhaps, or what I could say is more of a slower pace, where we don't have 25 people bidding on one house and they're not underpricing them to get 35 showings in 2 days. And so I think we'd like to get it back to that point. And some of us, I see some agents pricing it not to leave money on the table and pricing it at the price that they feel it's absolutely worth. But with that, then the consumer thinks, oh my goodness, that's going to sell 100,000 more and I don't want to buy it. And then those people don't get a bidding war. And then the realtors call them up and say, why didn't it sell? Well, it didn't sell because we priced it correctly. And half the people are listening to the news thinking everything is going to sell $100,000 more. And so every agent has a different strategy to their listings. And a lot of owners don't want to leave $200,000 on the table. Because back in the day when I started real estate, I'll just be really quick on this one. When I started in real estate and you signed a listing with me for $200,000 to sell your house, and if I brought you a $200,000 offer with all the terms and conditions that you wanted, you owed me a commission and you had to sell your house.
Okay.
So the questions now the consumers are asking us when they list their house, well, what if you bring me a full price offer and we're only asking $799, but I expect it to sell for $850?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you don't have to sell. Well, what do you mean I don't have to sell? And they don't have to pay me a commission either, because, that's not the way it is anymore. But they're old school, which used to be that way. So now we're seeing a lot of people that are testing the market and they're putting it out there. And then they're not getting the bidding wars, maybe because they priced it slightly high. And then the consumer thinks that there's something wrong. Well, no. There's nothing wrong with your house if it sells in 30 days.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with it if it sells in a week or in 1 day.
Yeah.
The thing is the norm now is 5 days on the market, sold in a bidding war with 20 offers, $100,000 plus more. And so it's hard to get back to the way it was because the consumers listen to the news and they think that's the same everywhere. And so I believe that as the agents, I think we're faulted. Many of the people are saying, oh, the agents are causing this. The agents are doing this. No, because we want to put them at the regular price. But then we're criticized by the seller that you didn't get me a bidding war. Well, I can get you a bidding war if I price it $200,000 less.
Right.
Because everybody's going to give you $200,000 more. Look at the house that sold in, I don't know if you heard that, the one that sold in Renfrew for $1 million over asking. Well, I'm sorry, but you should have just listed at $2 million.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
But at $2 million, nobody would have gone to see it. Because it's in Renfrew. Right?
Exactly.
But you sell it for $1 million on the water in Renfrew, and all of a sudden it sells for $1 million more. Wow, that's a phenomenal realtor. No, that's a realtor who played the strategy to get the consumer to the door. And it's sold for the price that it's worth.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I would say that these prices that we're seeing are what the houses are worth. If you calculate the 6% increase that we might have gone up when our market was low for 5 years.
Yeah.
If we look at that 6% or 5% during those instead of the nothing percent,
Yeah.
this might be part of the catch up
Yeah.
that would bring us back to a consistent market that is where our values should have been all along.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So is it a bubble? I don't believe this is a bubble. I just think that we're now in this new era of, we have a lot of population, we're bringing more immigration to the city, and we're now getting up there in the ranks of all the other big cities.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Awesome.
I couldn't agree more. On that note, why don't we finish it off by you letting everybody know how they can get a hold of you if they're looking to buy or sell? What's the best way? Email, phone call, website, social media? Lay it all out there for us.
I have 3 offices. I have an office in Arnprior, we have an office in Bell's Corners, and an office downtown in Somerset Street. So the company name is Remax Absolute Realty. My team is Joanne Goneau Team. Best way is my name, www.joannegoneau.com. So it's JoanneGoneau.com. That'll take you to my website, or you can pick up the old-fashioned way. I like phone calls. 613-851-5982 is the cell phone, and I always answer, or I'll always call you back within the hour. But it's been a great pleasure to be on this with you two. Both very lovely to see you both, and to have the opportunity to speak with you. And thank you for including me. And hopefully I've given you a lot of knowledge. And if any of your listeners want to reach out and have further questions, they're always welcome. I'm happy to speak to anybody and give them any insight at any time.
Awesome. Super. That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Joanne.